WeirdShady's back. Tell a friend. Guess we're back, guess we're back, guess we're back.
Alright, let's put the apron on, because today we're taking apart one of the biggest mysteries in the entire Norse God of War saga. And no, it's not Kratos. It's not Atreus. It's not even Odin.
Have you lost your mind?
It's Faye. Or Laufey, if you want to get technical about it. I mean, ever since God of War Laufey was revealed, I've seen a lot of people asking the same question. Why make a game about her when we have Kratos? And honestly, I really think that's the wrong question to ask. Because the more I've been thinking about it, the more convinced I've become that the Norse Saga was never really Kratos' story. Not completely, at least. It wasn't Odin's story either, even though he's the big bad during the entire Norse Saga. It wasn't Atreus' story, even though he's had a journey to become Loki, the champion of the Jotnar. All of this was in Faye's plan. But Kratos was the axe, and Atreus was the spark. Odin was just the obstacle they had to get through. Faye was the hand holding the match. And today, we're taking this whole machine of violence and acceptance apart. And yes, the apron still stays on, because this is gonna get messy. One of the strangest things about God of War 2018 is that the most important character to the story is already dead. Think about that for a second. The game opens with a funeral, not a mighty battle. Not a terrifying boss fight. Not even Kratos ripping someone's head off because he probably needed to floss. Instead, it starts with something much quieter. The beginning of a journey. The entire story begins because of Faye's final wish. To spread her ashes from the highest peak in all the realms. That's it. That's the recipe the game has cooking. One grieving father, one confused child, one supposedly impossible journey. Mix that together thoroughly. Allow emotional trauma to simmer for approximately 30 hours straight. I mean, without Faye's final request, nothing would have happened. Kratos stays hidden, Atreus never discovers who he's meant to be, Baldur never finds them, Odin's plans for tyrannical rule continue. Hell, even Ragnarök wouldn't unfold the way it does. The entire saga exists because of instructions left behind by someone who isn't alive to even see them completed. The story doesn't begin when Kratos cuts down a tree either. It begins years earlier, when Faye decides exactly what her family needs to become. And that's where things get quite interesting for sure. Because the deeper you look into the Norse Saga, the less Faye feels like a side character, and more she feels like an architect. Which is fitting, because apparently she had a blueprint for everybody's life.
The tenants arrive in the entrance hall here, are carried along the corridor on a conveyor belt in extreme comfort and towards the rotating knives.
Ah, it's the other kind. Variety is so important.
She's basically connected to everything. Let's take a look, shall we? Atreus, Faye. Kratos, Faye. The Giants, Faye. Ragnarök, again, Faye. At this point, I'm starting to think she built this entire thing herself. Because Faye wasn't just participating in the story. She was planning it. The more we learn throughout both games, the clearer this fact becomes. Every major character in this saga is following a path that somehow intersects with Faye. Atreus' identity, Faye. Kratos' transformation, Faye. The Giant's prophecy, also Faye. At this point, she's less of a side character and more like a project manager with access to fate itself. She knew things, like a lot of things actually. She understood the Giant prophecy. She understood what Atreus would become. She understood what significance Kratos would have. And most importantly, she knew exactly what kind of journey her family needed in order to come together. And one thing that made my mind implode when I first thought about it is that everybody in the Norse Saga is reacting. Kratos is reacting to his past. Atreus is reacting to his identity. Freya is reacting to loss. Odin is reacting to fear. Years before the story begins, Faye is already setting pieces into place. But everyone else is scrambling as the story continues on its course. But little did they know that Faye already left instructions. The funny thing is, when I first played God of War 2018, I didn't think much about Faye at all. She felt like the reason the story happened, a plot device. But at the end of the game, the big reveal, and after Ragnarök, after seeing how many threads led back to her, I've started wondering if she was actually the main character all along. Here's something I've never really seen discussed that much before. Faye and Odin are actually trying to solve the same problem. And that problem is that they both know that the prophecy exists. They both want to understand the future. They both want some degree of control over what happens next. But the way they approach that problem couldn't be more different from one another. Odin hoards what knowledge he can get. Faye shares it all with her loved ones. Odin manipulates fiercely. Faye guides caringly. Odin controls. Faye trusts. Odin spends centuries building what is essentially the most paranoid surveillance operation in Norse mythology. And somehow, Faye basically leaves behind a treasure map and gets better results. Just think about it. Odin's entire life is dedicated to preventing his fate.
If you had the chance to change your fate,
Every terrible thing he does comes from the fear he's bottling up. The fear of death, fear of uncertainty, and fear of losing control. Faye literally takes the opposite approach. She places her faith in people. Faith in Kratos, faith in Atreus, and in the idea that they both can become better than the prophecy expects them to be. And by the end of Ragnarök, who's right? Not Odin, that's for certain. Obviously, that's Faye. That shouldn't really be a surprise though, that the person with the least control ends up changing the future, and the person obsessed with control loses everything. That's not an accident. That's the entire point. But I think the most important thing Faye ever did happened before either game even started. She managed to change Kratos. And I don't think we talk about that enough. This is the ghost of Sparta we're talking about, after all. This is a man who turned entire pantheons into workplace safety violations. For many, this is a walking catastrophe with a scruffy beard. Yet, when we meet him in God of War 2018, he's trying. He's not healed, not by a long shot. He's not happy, but he's trying. Trying to be better. Trying to be a father. Trying to break a cycle that has followed him for centuries on end. And people often give Kratos credit for that, as they should. But somebody helped him get there. Somewhere before the story in the games began, Faye saw something worth saving. She looked at a man carrying enough trauma to crush an entire mountain, and decided that he wasn't beyond redemption. She gave him a family, a home, a reason to stay, a reason to build instead of destroy. And that might just be the most impressive thing anyone has managed in the whole Norse Saga. Because Odin couldn't change, Thor tried but really struggled to change, Baldur couldn't change at all, but Kratos did.
There is no forgiving you. You chose! I chose, but you are more than that.
And Faye helped in making that possible. Which means that one of the most important battles in God of War happened completely off-screen. It happened when Faye convinced the most dangerous man in the world that he could become something better.
Good boy.
And here's where I think people get a little bit distracted. Everyone wants to know how much Faye even knew. How much of the prophecy did she really know? How far ahead was she planning? What secrets was she hiding? Those are interesting questions indeed, if you ask me. But I don't think they're the most important ones, though. The real mystery is why she believed any of this would work. Because her entire plan depends on people changing. Kratos had to change. Atreus also had to change. Overall, the future had to change. Yes, I know that she could see the future, but that's kind of the boring answer. But anyway, everything depended on the belief that people aren't trapped by what they're supposed to be. And that's exactly what both games are about. Breaking cycles, rejecting destiny, choosing who you want to become. The incredible thing in this whole epic journey isn't that Faye understood the prophecy. It's that she believed the prophecy could be overcome. And she was right, after all. So when people ask why God of War Laufey exists, I don't think it's because Sony wanted a spin-off. And I don't think it's just because people liked Faye as a character. I think it's because we've spent 2 entire games looking at the shadow she left behind. I mean, we have all the murals, the stories, the memories, and the consequences that all of this led to. Every road eventually led back to her. Why did Kratos change? Why did Atreus become Loki? Why did Ragnarök happen? Why did the prophecy fail? Every answer points in the same direction. For 2 games, we've seen the results of Faye's work. We've seen the machine she built, but we've never actually met the person responsible. And that's why God of War Laufey feels so interesting to me, because this isn't the next chapter. It's kind of the missing first chapter, in a sense. The foundation of it all, so to speak. And it's not showing us what happened after Ragnarök, I think. It's finally showing us what started it. For 2 games, we've been living in the world Faye built. Now, we finally get to meet the builder. But anyway, that's all I had for today. Thank you very much for watching. Fare thee well for now!